Alright, so I decided to do a short screen recording about how to debug. You want to debug for two reasons. One is to actually find the bugs in your code when you have them, and another is to learn how the code works. In this case, I will show you how to debug permissions for the node. Drupal 8 has a very large system of permissions, and in this case I want to show you permissions or access in the node module. One thing that you need to know is the basic structure of how Drupal is structured, so that you would know where to apply the test point. This is something that you cannot easily do unless you know how Drupal is set. So in this case, say I want to know what grants or deny access to a node. And I open the node class in the node module. I go to core modules, node, sources and entity, and open the node entity class. And there is a function called access. And I put a breakpoint and I reload the page. Now, one thing which you need to know is that you need to enable debugging support or development mode for your site. You can Google it separately, but if you have Drupal console installed and Sidecat, which I use, my own flavor of Drupal has Drupal console installed, you can just type Drupal site mode dev and it will put the site into the development or debugging mode, which will disable caching, enable verbose error messages, and will add theming hook suggestions, template suggestion for your theme in the form of comments, like that. So you can then actually see which template is used where and which are alternative template names. It is important to have the debug or dev mode enabled in Drupal so that it will disable caching, because sometimes when you want to debug, the breakpoint will not work because it will skip it, because it's cached. The pages are cached. So disabling cache is what you want to do. You just need to remember to switch to production mode before you upload the site on production, because otherwise it will be slow, it will not cache, and it will have those comments of template suggestions on the production, which you don't want to have. So now we want to debug and see what's inside this access function. Now I put my breakpoint and I make my PHPStorm to listen to it, and I reload the page. It will load a little bit slower now because I have debug enabled and it doesn't work with cache now. So once the execution has reached this point, it stopped. And I have two main areas. One is the variables, which are available at that point, and I can see that the operation variable is view, so I'm viewing the node, and then account interface. Account is this, user ID 1. Like if I wanted to check what variables or what attributes the user has, I can check that here. Another part of the window is frames. This is called the call stack. So in order to reach this access function in the node PHP on line 188, it made a path from index.php, which is the main call file which gets called at every request, and through the kernel, through the page cache, which doesn't work in this case, through the access manager, and to entity access check, and to the node. This is very helpful in case if you're just studying the code, you can see how the operation was passed from one class and one function to another until you reach this point. So this is very helpful. And you can actually go back in the call stack and see which values it held as it progressed. And then of course the variables. You can see which variables were passed. So if you're having an error because of some missing variable or wrong variable or some unexpected behavior, you can just go and see what values were provided that could have caused it. So that's one way to debug, is that you can actually learn how the code works, how the variables get passed from one code file, from one class to another, from one function to another. Another thing is that if you are debugging templates for theming, you may want to know which are those variables, where are they coming from. And this is a twig template which Drupal 8 uses. It's like HTML markup with those little parts of print and logic, which is a twig templating. So you want to know where are those variables coming from. And they can be coming from preprocessed function in your theme. So you can just go and check it out in those functions. And this is where they come from. And say in the node preprocess function, you can put yourself a breakpoint, and I usually put a equals 1 so that I can easily find and delete it later. And reload the page. What? Come on, what's happening? Yeah. So the bsub preprocess node gets the parameter called variables, and you can open and see what it gets. So this node, this template of node will get those variables. Or if you're checking what the page gets, like those variables for the page, you can go into template name preprocess page. Here it is. And then reload. And then see these are the variables that it gets. So it's the page itself, page.footer, you see, page.navigation collapsible, page.navigation collapsible. This is what it gets, a renderable array. In Drupal, those arrays, in the renderables, those items that have that sharp mark, they are considered variables, and those that don't have it are renderables. So if it gets the page, it will want to render this, but it will not want to render that attach thing, because it thinks it's just for information, for storing variables, rather than trying to render it. So you can see what variables this template gets from here, and you can actually add your own variables and parameters and pass them on to the template. I hope it helps in your debugging.